their mother would love to bang their heads together and say, "Boys, grow up."
For years, Paul Burrell remained the loyal butler, guarding the secrets of the woman he served, the people's princess. But time has a way of changing views, and silence, once meant to protect, can allow the truth to be buried beneath speculation. Now, he is ready to speak. Not to exaggerate, but to reveal the Diana he knew, the real woman behind the crown. What was she truly like when the cameras were gone? And what truths have Paul carried for so long, waiting for the right moment to share? Join us as we reveal what Princess Diana's butler finally confirmed about her. Paul Burrell confirms the rumors. Imagine bringing a cup of tea to a woman who, despite the grandeur of her title, carried a heart burdened by sorrow. Paul Burrell, Diana's butler, had done so countless times. He had been more than a servant. He had been her confidant, her silent witness, the one who saw the cracks beneath the flawless image the world adored. Now, years after her tragic passing, he found himself carrying a different weight, the responsibility of preserving her truth. For a long time he had remained silent, believing that his loyalty to Diana meant keeping her secrets. But as time passed, he watched the world's perception of her shift. Myths and half-truths clouded her story, painting her as a tragic figure, a woman consumed by sadness. He knew that wasn't the full picture. Diana had been more than her struggles. She had been a force of nature. He could no longer sit back and watch as the woman he had known became distorted by public speculation. And so, with careful thought and deep emotion, he decided to speak. But what exactly did he have to say? One of the most profound aspects of Diana's life, Burrell emphasized, was her role as a mother. If the world saw her as a princess, William and Harry saw her as their protector, their source of warmth in a world of cold formality. She adored her sons, prioritizing their happiness over every royal obligation. She had a vision for them, one that defied tradition. She didn't want them confined to the isolation of palace walls, disconnected from the world outside. She wanted them to understand life beyond privilege, and to develop compassion not from speeches, but from experience. And so, she took them on outings. The public must have been thrilled to know that the future kings of Great England had stood in line at McDonald's, giggling over Happy Meals, or that they had boarded public buses with their mother, unnoticed by those around them. Diana had even taken them to homeless shelters, holding their small hands as they listened to stories of hardship and survival. Burrell recalled that these moments were her way of grounding them, showing them that their titles did not make them more important than anyone else. Diana's influence on her sons was evident even years after her passing. Both William and Harry did a good job carrying her legacy forward, championing causes she had once fought for. For instance, Harry's commitment to veterans and William's focus on mental health, each step they took was a clear reflection of the values she had instilled in them. For Burrell, seeing them grow into the men Diana had hoped they would become was both heartwarming and bittersweet. She had longed to see them reach adulthood, to witness their triumphs, to be the mother standing proudly by their side. With his voice thick with emotion, he said that she would be so proud of them. Everything she did was for them, and they've honored her in the most beautiful way. But Diana's story was not just one of motherhood. It was a story that blended courage and resilience. Despite the challenges she faced, she never lost sight of her purpose. Somehow, the loyal butler, Burrell knew that telling her story was his final act of devotion. He wanted the world to see Diana as she truly was, not as the tragic figure the tabloids had created, but as the woman who had touched lives, fought for change, and left behind a legacy that would never fade. And so, with the weight of memory pressing upon him, he prepared to share her truth. The silent battle. There was a time when the world saw only the fairy tale of a shy kindergarten teacher who became a princess. Yes, Diana was once a commoner who was transformed into royalty, and to the public that was enough. But within the towering walls of Buckingham Palace, she fought battles no one could see. Paul Burrell, had witnessed them all. He had stood in the background as Diana's light dimmed as she struggled to fit into a world that had no intention of welcoming her. The palace, far from being a home, was a battlefield of protocol and expectations where tradition mattered more than happiness. And Diana, with her warmth and humanity, didn't seem to fit in there. Her first enemy was loneliness. The young princess had stepped into her role with hope, believing that love would be enough to bridge the distance between her and Charles. But how wrong she was. She soon realized that she had married into an institution, not a family. Charles was distant, consumed by duty, and tangled in the shadow of another woman, Camilla Parker Bowles. Diana didn't just sit idle. She had fought to make the marriage work, to be the perfect wife, the perfect princess. But what was perfection but an illusion? Behind the smiles and public appearances, there were nights of tears, whispered phone calls to friends who could offer little comfort, and a growing sense of isolation. It didn't take too long for her struggles to take a toll on her health. The pressure to maintain an ideal image became unbearable, leading to an eating disorder that would remain her secret for years. She had once described it as a way to control something in a life where everything else felt out of her hands. But perhaps her greatest battle was with the firm itself, the institution that dictated her every move, that sought to mold her into someone she was never meant to be. Diana was expected to be silent, to endure. But fortunately or not, she was not a woman who could fade into the background. Then she took a bold step. She found purpose in her pain. If she could not be the wife Charles wanted, if she could not change the rules that bound her, she would redefine what it meant to be a princess. She stepped away from the stiffness of royal protocol, choosing instead to be present, to be human. Yet her defiance came at a cost. The more she shone in the public eye, the more resistance she faced behind palace doors. She was accused of overshadowing Charles, of drawing too much attention. The press, once enchanted by her, became relentless, twisting her actions and turning her vulnerabilities into headlines. And so, just like that, Diana was trapped between two worlds, adored by the public and resented by the institution that should have supported her. The weight of it all became unbearable, leading to one of the most defining moments of her life, her decision to step away. When she and Charles separated, the world watched with fascination. But for Diana, it was far from just fascination. It was liberation. She had been stripped of her title, but so what? She had reclaimed something far more important, herself. And, as Paul Burrell watched her walk away from the palace for the last time, he knew one thing for certain. The real Diana was finally free. Yet even as Diana stepped away from the palace, reclaiming her independence, the weight of her past was never far behind. She had won the love of the people, but at what cost? A global force for good. It's needless to say Diana's influence extended far beyond the walls of Kensington. As she went through her own personal struggles within the royal family, she at least found solace and purpose in her humanitarian work. The world saw her as more than just a princess. She naturally became a symbol of hope, a voice for the voiceless, and a beacon of compassion in a world often clouded by indifference. Her commitment to humanitarian causes was not a mere obligation of her royal status, but a deeply personal mission. Among the many issues she championed, one of the most groundbreaking was her advocacy for AIDS awareness. At a time when fear and misinformation surrounded the disease, Diana made a bold statement. She was photographed shaking hands with an AIDS patient without gloves, an act that shattered myths and helped reduce the stigma surrounding those suffering from the illness. Her actions were not just symbolic. They had a profound impact on global perceptions of HIV/AIDS and contributed to increased awareness and medical advancements in treatment. Diana's compassion knew no borders. She traveled extensively, using her platform to highlight issues that were often overlooked. One of her most defining moments was her visit to Angola in 1997, where she walked through a live minefield in support of the campaign to ban landmines. Wearing a protective vest and helmet, she stepped into a dangerous reality that many communities face daily. With time, the images of Diana in that minefield became iconic, drawing the world's attention to the devastating consequences of landmines on civilians. Her efforts were instrumental in the eventual signing of the Ottawa Treaty, which aimed to eliminate the use of these deadly weapons. Would her humanitarian work be completed if it didn't extend to children's welfare? Absolutely not. Diana visited countless hospitals, orphanages, and shelters, ensuring that every child she met felt seen and valued. She once described her greatest joy as simply sitting on the floor and playing with children, bringing them laughter and comfort. Her work with Great Ormond Street Hospital and other charities showcased her genuine desire to make a difference in young lives, beyond the public eye. But even with her growing global presence, Diana remained deeply connected to her roots as a mother. She took great care in balancing her responsibilities, ensuring that her sons, William and Harry, understood the value of service. She took them to visit homeless shelters, making sure they experienced life beyond the luxuries of royal privilege. She wanted them to grow up grounded, compassionate, and aware of the struggles faced by everyday people. Her approach to parenting was unconventional for a royal, but it cemented her legacy as a mother who prioritized her children's emotional well-being above all else. Diana's ability to connect with people from all walks of life was a skill unmatched. She had an innate warmth that made everyone she met feel special. It didn't matter whether it was a terminally ill patient, a war survivor, or a grieving family. Unlike many public figures, she did not simply observe suffering, she immersed herself in it, determined to bring relief where she could. This authenticity was what endeared her to millions. Yet, sadly, even as she changed lives around the world and shared happiness with lime candy, Diana's own search for happiness remained elusive. The palace still weighed greatly on her. It didn't help matters that the increasing media scrutiny made it difficult for her to move forward freely. Her relationships, friendships, and every public appearance were dissected by tabloids hungry for sensational stories. She once confided in friends that the very platform she used to help others had also become a prison. Despite the relentless and ever-present public gaze, Diana pressed on. But if the palace had tried to silence her, the world had done the opposite. It had given her a voice. And Diana would use that voice to fight for the future of others. The voice for the voiceless. Despite the immense personal challenges she faced, Diana absolutely refused to let adversity define her. If anything, the struggles only strengthened her resolve to make a meaningful impact on the world. She understood pain and isolation, and rather than retreating into her own suffering, she chose to extend her hand to those who needed it most. It was this relentless compassion that made her truly extraordinary. One of the causes closest to Diana's heart was the fight against HIV/AIDS. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, when misinformation and fear about the disease were rampant, many avoided any association with those diagnosed. Patients were stigmatized, abandoned, and treated as outcasts. But Diana, with her characteristic defiance of convention, saw beyond the fear and prejudice. In April 1987, she visited London's Middlesex Hospital, where the UK's first dedicated HIV/AIDS ward had been opened. The world watched in complete astonishment as she shook hands with an AIDS patient without gloves. It was a simple gesture, but a revolutionary one. In that moment, she shattered the dangerous misconception that the disease could be spread by touch. She declared that HIV does not make people dangerous. To know, you can shake their hands and give them a hug. Heaven knows they need it. Her advocacy did not stop there. She continued to visit hospitals, orphanages, and care facilities, comforting patients and using her influence to demand better health care and more compassionate treatment. She worked tirelessly with organizations like the National AIDS Trust and the London Lighthouse, bringing global awareness to an issue that many preferred to ignore. But Diana's humanitarian work extended far beyond the fight against HIV/AIDS. She became an advocate for the homeless, for victims of domestic violence, and for children in need. She often took William and Harry with her on visits to homeless shelters, ensuring that they understood the realities of life beyond the palace gates. She wanted them to see the human cost of neglect and poverty, and to grow into men who would use their privilege to help others. Diana's impact on humanitarian causes was unparalleled, but it came at a cost. Her efforts were sometimes met with criticism, especially from those who saw her work as an attempt to overshadow the royal family. She was accused of seeking publicity and of meddling in political matters that were beyond her jurisdiction. But to those who knew her, these accusations were absurd. Diana did not need the limelight. She used it as a tool to illuminate the suffering of others. Even as she worked tirelessly for the causes she believed in, she found herself increasingly isolated. The press, relentless in their scrutiny, followed her every move. With the dissolution of her marriage, she lost the full protection of the royal establishment, and the media intrusion became more invasive than ever. Yet, she carried on, determined to make a difference in the lives of those who had no one else to fight for them. Her butler, Paul Burrell, later recalled how she would often sit in her Kensington Palace apartment, sipping tea and reflecting on the day's work. She found solace in those quiet moments, but with that solace also came a deep sadness. He explained that she gave so much of herself, but at the end of the day, she had very few people she could truly count on. It goes without saying that Diana's humanitarian efforts were her only way of channeling her pain into purpose. She had been denied the fairy tale she once imagined, but she refused to let her struggles be in vain. She would not allow herself to be defined by her suffering. Instead, she dedicated herself to being a voice for the voiceless. It raises the question, what makes a true legacy? Royal titles or the lives we touch? A legacy that endures. Even as the years passed, Diana's impact remained as strong as ever. Her sons, William and Harry, grew into the men she had envisioned, compassionate, driven, and determined to carry on her legacy of service. From their work with veterans to their advocacy for mental health awareness, every cause they championed was a reflection of the lessons their mother had instilled in them. They walked in her footsteps, not as mere princes, but as men who understood the value of human connection beyond the palace walls. For Burrell, seeing them grow into the individuals Diana had raised them to be was both a comfort and a sorrowful reminder of her absence. He often wondered how different things might have been if she had lived to see them become husbands and fathers. He imagined her laughter filling the halls of their homes, her gentle advice guiding them through life's challenges, and her unshakable love surrounding their children. But even in her absence, Diana's influence was undeniable. Her humanitarian work, too, continued to inspire generations. The causes she had fought for lived on through organizations and individuals who carried her mission forward. In many ways, Diana had transcended the role of a royal and had become a symbol of hope, empathy, and resilience. As Burrell reflected on her life, he knew that Diana's story was far more than the tragic headlines that often accompanied her name. She had been a woman of extraordinary strength, a mother who had loved fiercely, and a humanitarian who had used her platform to bring light to those in darkness. Her story was not one of mere tragedy, but of triumph over adversity, of courage in the face of overwhelming pressure, and of an unwavering commitment to kindness. Burrell often said he wanted people to remember her as she truly was, not as the figure the tabloids created, but as the woman who touched the lives of so many. Even decades after her passing, the world continued to speak her name with reverence. The Princess of Wales had left behind more than just a legacy. She had left a lesson. A lesson in love, in humanity, and in the power of one person to make a difference. And as long as those lessons were remembered, Diana's story would never fade. What do you think about the things Paul Burrell confirmed about the people's princess? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more updates. And be sure to click the next video on your screen. You won't want to miss it.